Hi everyone, I'm Dave with LUXX Kitchen Bath in Boise, Idaho, and today we're going to have our product expert talk about the Irinox Blast Chiller. It's the Freddy model, and he's going to talk about why it's such an incredibly useful appliance.
This is the Irinox Blast Freezer and Chiller. Irinox started in 1989 building commercial blast freezers for restaurants and food packaging companies. So they were one of the original blast freezer manufacturers worldwide. This is their new Freddy 45, which they've revamped for North America to make it more user-friendly and 120 volt operation instead of 240. So you can really put this in a lot of homes that the previous generation wouldn't fit for one reason or another, not having available 240 volt supply. So on a blast freezer or blast chiller, there's really two operations. One is chilling food quickly. Now, the reason you want to chill food quickly, as soon as you cook product and it's exposed to normal room temperature, things start to happen to that food. You can't just put that food in the fridge because it's too hot to put in a fridge, so you usually have to let it cool at room temperature for a while before you put it in a fridge, after you've, of course, finished eating what you're going to eat. So, in order to store food longer and have it be fresh, key word is fresh, what do? Well, you have to get that temperature down rapidly, shock, cool it, and that's what the Freddy does. It'll chill about 20 times faster than your refrigerator. So the idea is, after you've cooked food, you've served up dinner, when you're finished, you can put it in the chiller to bring the temperature down rapidly, and then you can put it in your fridge. So instead of getting 2 or 3 days of storage life, and then you look at it, that doesn't look too good, and you throw it out, now you can have it for 7 to 10 days. So in order to store food longer after it's in the blast chiller, basically there's 4 things that chilling fast or shock cooling will do to the food. One is it closes the pores to reduce evaporation. When food evaporates, it loses its texture, its flavor, its mineral content, its vitamins. So that'll help it store longer in the refrigerator. So shocks the food, cools it quickly, closes the pores, keeps the evaporation down, gives it longer storage life. The other thing it does is it reduces bacteria. So bacteria doubles every 15 minutes. So the longer you have the food sitting out on the countertop after you've cooked it, the more bacteria multiplies. So then you put it in the fridge, you're already starting a losing battle. So if you can put the bacteria growth at bay by shock cooling it, you can put it in the fridge. That'll also help it store longer. The other thing it does, number 3, is it prevents oxidation. So when food is evaporating and it hits air, it oxidizes, it turns different colors. It doesn't look as presentable as a fresh plate of fruit does before it sits out for a long time. And the last but not least is, can you take a guess, Dave? What's the last one? No guess whatsoever. That's funny. Overcooking. So, just because you pulled the food off of the stovetop or out of the oven doesn't mean it's not still continuously cooking. So once you hit that perfect pasta, you don't want it to keep cooking even though you've taken it off the stove, so you can put it in the blast cooler. It'll stop the overcooking process. So 4 key features of a blast chiller is longer storage life, but more importantly, fresh food. You wouldn't consider pulling stuff out of your fridge that's been 3 or 4 days sitting in there and then throw it in your microwave or your saucepan and reheat it and say this is fresh. That's not fresh. Fresh is when you first make the food and you eat it. Nobody can ever normally cook a big batch of food and eat the whole thing, so how do you store it and be able to use it? You get a Freddy 45. So blast chilling, thermal shock, longer storage life. Now, in the real world, what's a good example of that? Well, there's several examples. Let's say you had a kid that had celiac disease, and it's really hard to go out to a restaurant and find something that he likes to eat, but there's a favorite recipe that mom makes at home that he just loves. So you can cook a big batch on Sunday. You can use part of it for dinner, portion it out, save it, put part of it in the fridge, freeze part of it for later use. So when he pulls that out, or you're reheating it for him, it's going to be fresh. It's freshness is what this delivers. Health, freshness, convenience, and safety. You know that the food that you're eating is definitely going to be more fresh than just letting it sit out on a countertop for a half hour and then putting it in the refrigerator. So that's the beauty of a blast chiller. What's another example? Another example would be, say you were diabetic. Again, hard to go out to a restaurant and find recipes that are really low in that glycemic index. So there's a favorite recipe that you make that you want to enjoy, you can do the same thing. So medical reasons, freshness, health reasons. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons people use blast chillers. You don't have to be a chef to make those terrific desserts to want to use a blast chiller. There's real world examples of how this will help you in your everyday life. So when you freeze in a normal freezer, the food has time to evaporate, expand, and you get macro crystal freezing. That's why it's not great for fish, for one example. By the way, the stuff you buy in the grocery store, that's all flash frozen. When you go on the big fishing expedition to Alaska and you bring your fish in, they flash freeze it. So when you put it on the plane, it's packed with dry ice. By the time you get it home, it's frozen the way it should be frozen. So it tastes better. So in a normal freezer, it's just not fast enough, and it allows those microcrystals to start tearing the fiber of your food. So it changes the texture, loses its vitamins, its minerals. That's why when you take a steak out of the refrigerator and you let it defrost, there's lots of blood in there because it's been torn up from the inside. So the best way to freeze is through blast freezing, which forms microcrystals. So they're a lot smaller than basically ice being made inside of your freezer, so things will defrost faster. But when you defrost a steak, for instance, there's no blood, and once it's done defrosting, it looks fresh. It looks just like you bought it from the grocery store, or in Dave's case, he's a high roller, the butcher's, right? So you want that beautiful textured marbled steak. It looks just like that after you blast freeze it. Again, it's going to last longer, so instead of maybe 3 months fresh in a freezer, you can get more like 9 to 12 months when you blast freeze something first before you put it in the freezer. So it's all about freshness, convenience, and health. All right, we're going to do a little demo here. We're going to freeze some fruit. It takes about 45 minutes normally to freeze the fruit. What's really interesting is when it's frozen on the Freddy and you put it in your mouth, it really evaporates quickly, but it tastes just like it's fresh. Like, you will not know that this was frozen once you pop this fruit in your mouth. So we're just going to do a basic timed cycle. Go ahead and pop that in there, Dave. And we're going to come back in about 45 minutes when this is finished, and you can see how it looks. And we'll have a look. So I think we're about done with the blast freezing of the sample fruit. We're going to take that out now. We're going to demo a little piece of fruit. I'm going to turn this off because it's noisy.
Shouldn't you have used an oven mitt, Larry? You don't risk burning
I have
your
thick
fingers.
hands.
Okay.
So yeah, don't try this at home.
Right.
So go ahead, Dave. Give it a shot.
Well, they don't look frozen. There is no frost buildup.
They are pretty amazing.
That's unbelievable.
Videographer's hand going into the photo.
They really retain that flavor.
They do it.
Like those are raspberries and they're quite tart. They must be in season up here in Boise, Idaho. But they're really good. Let's try a blueberry. Another use this would be good for: seasonal fruits. Like you have your favorite fruit, you go to the fruit stand, you buy them. They're not really usable for a long time unless you preserve them or make jams and that type of thing. But if you just like eating fresh fruit, you can blast freeze this and store it until next season, and you'll have that fruit that you like all season long. Another thing, if you have a home garden and you're growing your own vegetables, your own fruits, that helps you be able to store that product, not just freeze it and then pull it out and it's kind of lumpy because it's got that micro crystal freezing because it's slow, but have it fresh when you pull it out. And if you were to let it defrost and then eat it, it would taste just like it did when you picked it. I mean, it is pretty amazing technology. And that's why all the commercial kitchens that build product to put in those grocery store freezer shelves flash freeze everything before it's shipped to give it the longest, freshest shelf life as possible. I'm glad you brought that up. Another thing this is really good for is if, and I don't do this myself, I eat sushi, but I don't make
Right.
sushi. Raw fish, there's a parasite in raw fish. You have to chill that raw fish to a certain degree for a certain amount of time quickly to make sure that that parasite is basically disabled, eliminated, evaporated, however you want to say it. This is what this is designed for too. So if you're doing, a chef may use it for that reason, or a home chef that likes to do their own sushi that doesn't want to get, and I forget the name of that parasite, but it's pretty common in fish. Or if you just like to fish and you want to make sure that that's been eliminated. When you freeze fish in a regular freezer, it just doesn't taste very good when you take it out
No, the
because
texture
it's been torn
gets
apart.
affected.
The texture's affected, the flavor gets affected, everything gets affected. When you blast freeze fish, it's perfect when it's defrosted. So when you blast freeze a steak, you can take that steak right out, put it right on the grill. You don't have to wait for it to defrost just because of the way that it was frozen to begin with. So this also is a slow cook oven. So it's a 2-in-1 unit, which is really handy. There's a couple settings. When you first turn it on, it'll say cold function or hot function. View hot function, there's a hold feature, there's a proofing cycle, so if you're really into baking breads, it can go from 80 up to 120 degrees. There's a ready dish cycle, so say you had your leftovers that you perfectly preserved, you took them out of the freezer, you can put them in here and program it so it would hold it at fridge temperature, and then at 4 o'clock you wanted it to heat up and be ready to eat at 5 o'clock. So you can program this thing so you can put it in at the beginning of the day when you're going to work, and then when you come home you can have a nice hot home cooked meal. It also has another function which is just basically designed to hold it at whatever temperature you want to set it at. So if you want to set it at 140, you can do that. You can change the temperature to whatever you want to set it to, up to 185 degrees. Save that, push start. So it is a pretty simple appliance to use. This is a timed for 5 hours at 158 degrees. We want it to be done at 1750. We want the final holding phase after it has completed that cycle to go back into the fridge mode, or do you want it to hold it at a temperature in hot mode, depending on what you do. Most all these cycles on here, whether it's a cold cycle or a hot cycle, when it's finished with that cycle, it'll go into a holding phase for 48 hours. After 2 days, if you forgot you put something in there for 2 days, then that's your own fault. and you're gonna have a mess on your hands. But it does give you that extra time if you put something in there and you're running late or traffic's holding you up, so you don't have to worry so much about it. But it'll continually beep. It'll drive you nuts until you say, what's that beeping, and you go pull it out. So on the cold settings also, there are some pretty nice options. There's a bottle chilling function, there's a defrost function, and then there's a hold for storage temperature function. So hot functions, like I say, there's 4 main hot functions, timed to be finished at a certain time at a certain temperature. If you get stuck and you're not sure what this does, you just push question mark and it'll basically tell you what that cycle does, whether it's a hot cycle or a cold cycle. So it's fairly intuitive. This up here will tell you what the internal temperature is, and all of these cycles can use either timed setting or probe. So there is a probe. If you want to cook meat to a certain internal temperature, you can use the probe, or it'll freeze to a certain temperature and then go into that storage phase. So there you have it.